at registering our dedicated server to our backend for the purpose of having it ready for us to query all these dedicated server for matchmaking. So the goal is that when our dedicated server starts, he sends his information to our backend so that our backend can kind of keep track of which server we have up and then how many places we have for players. Let's get started. All right, so we're gonna start in the server. So in the server, what we actually want to do, let me close that here, big folder. What we want to do is we want to have a server controller. So that's going to be the endpoint that the game server is going to hit to get more information, register himself for to the backend so that we know that this server exists. So that when player wants to know, hey, I'm looking for a game, which servers are available, we can actually help them with that. So what we're going to do is we're going to start and we're going to create here a new file, and it's going to be server_controller.py, and there it is. So now it's going to be mostly the same. So we're going to do the blueprint first. So server_controller equal blueprint, blueprint like this, and then server_controller and that name here. There we go. So that we can do at server controller dot route. So we do another route. This is going to be /server/register. So this is where, like, whenever the game server starts, he's going to register himself to this endpoint. So for that, not here, but outside the methods is going to be a post because he's sending information. There we go. So definition, register, server, boom, 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 and then this. By the way, if you want to make some temporary endpoint, you can do pass. So pass means the declaration is still valid, but the endpoint is literally doing nothing. So that's what we're going to do, because we're going to need another one that we're going to do today, and it's server status. This is also going to be a post because it's going to be sending us some information, and we're going to do update server status. So this is because at some point we're going to need the server to update us on in which state he is. So is he already running a game? So then we need to remove him from the matchmaking process. Is he waiting for a player to connect? So that means, like, we should prioritize him because he may have already some people on it, but some players on it, but then he needs more. So it depends on how we implement our matchmaking, and it's probably going to be like a really simple implementation because that's not really the goal of all this. It's just so you know, like, again, this whole series is not like to make foolproof production ready code. It's to give you a good overview of how these things work. So that whenever you use another service that probably does that for you. So if you do use like a GameLift from AWS or anything from Microsoft or Epic Games, Steam, you kind of know how these services operate. You kind of have the knowledge of how it works behind so that you can use them properly. Okay, so this is the two we're gonna work on right now. So for that, we're gonna import some stuff. So from Flask, import blueprint request, because we're gonna need that request, and JSONify because we're dealing with JSON. So these are mainly the import. Okay, so now let's start with the register server. So register server, we're gonna need some information from the server. So mainly his IP address. So this is gonna be sent to us by a form. Form.get, and then we're gonna say IP address. So we're really like doing the same thing we did like with in the other. It's mostly when it's post, that's how you're gonna get the information. So now we want the IP address, and for now, let's say that's kind of the only thing we need when the register so when the server kind of registers itself. So it's really like the first time he's gonna call us and he's gonna say, hey, I'm spawning into I'm starting right now, so let me register myself, and whenever I'm ready, I'm gonna update my status. So yeah, so what we're gonna do here is we're gonna do if IP address, we're gonna do server equals server service that we're gonna create dot register server, and then we're gonna send them the IP address. Okay, so there we go. So that's what we're gonna do, and then we're gonna return JSONify server. And if it doesn't work, then we're gonna return, and this is gonna be a new syntax, but JSONify. We're gonna say this, and then we're gonna put here whoops. We're gonna here. And then we're going to put here the status, which is going to be a 403, which means it's a client error. And yeah, so that we couldn't register. He didn't send us, in fact, the IP address. So that's the kind of only way it's going to reach that point. Okay, so that's what we have for that. So right now, what we should do is create the model. So let's go into model. Let's go in here, new file, server.py. So that's going to represent all the data we want to have in a server. So let's go class server. It's going to be, let's import it, import Mongo engine as ME. So it's going to be a me.document with a capital letter. And then here it's going to have some information, right? IP address, which equals, it's a string. So string field, it's required. So that's important. Required equal true. That's mostly it. We could also put it's unique because it is unique. Or could we have two with the same? Technically, no, because I don't think we can have two with the same. So let's go with unique. Unique equals true also. So that way we know that the IP address needs to be unique. We're going to go and set a status, which is going to be equal to me.string field also. Default. So for the status, what we want to do is we're going to create an enum. So default equals, we're going to say server status dot starting dot value. Okay, so we're going to create here that enum. So let's say class server status, and so in parentheses in Python you kind of say what it inherits. So here there's enum. Okay, so enum is a valid thing, so that means that this class is actually an enum. So server status, and we're going to say starting, which is going to be equal to a string. So it's a little bit different than some other language. You can put string in here. Starting, waiting for players, which is going to be here the same thing. I like to put the same thing. And then in game, or let's say in game. So that means like there's a game in progress. We can rename that at some point if we prefer. And then shut down equals then this in string shut down. Here we go. So now that enum, we need to import it. So import enum from enum. No. It's like from enum import. Import enum. There we go. So that's it. Now we have a basic server status, and then what we want is to have the players that are actually connected to this server. So list string, list field, sorry, and the field is going to be a string. So string field, because we're going to set the we're going to send them just the IDs of the player, because if you need some more info about the players, then you can fetch it from the other endpoints to get more info. We just need kind of a basic reference of who is on this server. Okay, so now that we have this and we have our server controller, we need our server service. So we're gonna go in here in the service folder and create that file. So server underscore service.py. There you go. So for the server service, we're gonna do we're gonna import basically our models. So models.server import server, and then we just do two methods that are going to be pretty simple. Register server, which is going to take a server. Oops. Well, we're going to do an IP address, which is a string. So this is how in Python you say that this parameter is supposed to be a string. It's the type in thing, so that helps us at the compilation time. And then server equals, and then we just create the object server IP address equal well, let's call it here server IP address so that we know server IP address, so that we can just put that here and there's no confusion. And then we do server.save, and then we return server. No need for semicolon. Okay, so that's what it is. So like if we go back here right now, we're gonna import that. So like always, you just import it at the top here. So import service dot server service as server service. There we go. So now we have that. Okay, so now this is all we need for the register. So whenever we start our server, we should see that this is like called. And after that, the only thing that's going to be needed from the server is just going to be to update its status. But before we go in the client, let's just make already the other endpoint we're going to need. So in our case, what we need now that the server can register is to be able to set its status. So since it's super simple, we're just going to do it. Set server status. So we're going to need the ID of the server. So you're just going to need to send us that. And then its status, which is going to be another string. And then what we do is we search for that server. So for that, you use the server class and you say objects, and then you say, you can say PK, so the primary key is the value is ID, and then we say first. I think you don't have to put PK here, you can just put ID, but I'm putting it here, and then you're gonna say update status equal status. So the status on the server, it's going to update it to that status. And then we return server. There we go. So that's simple. And now we can use that in here in our endpoint to register. So what we do here is we get the information. So the two information is ID, request.form.get, and then we pass him ID, and then the status, which is going to be request.form.get, and then status. There we go. Just a little reminder that we're using capital cases, even if like JSON and then Python use snake case, but it's because we're communicating with C#, which is camel case, and it's just easier to not have that layer that transform from one type to the other. It's just simpler for us, so we're just using C# convention in the naming of the fields and also in the models. So if ID and status, because we need both, we do server equal server service dot set server status, and we pass in the ID and the status. Okay, so I don't know if you see with the autocomplete, but there's two ways to, because you might, I never explained this, but you might have seen me use both. So I'm just going to explain it. Let's say you didn't want to pass him the ID for that set server because they would be optional for some reason. There's two ways to pass field. You can either pass them in the order that they've been declared. So in here it would be ID and then status. Or if you want to omit ID because you don't want to pass them, you can do status and it's going to complete, and you can just say status. Okay, and then you don't have to pass the ID. That's how you specify parameters. By skipping the first one, you can just specify like the one you actually want. But on our case, we pass all of them because we already know that this function needs all of them. So we're going to do this, and then we're going to return server in JSONify of the server. And otherwise, we're going to return here, it's a mistake. You should have sent me the parameters that I wanted. So here we go. Okay. So for now, I think it's pretty much everything we need on the server. The only thing we need now is to register those endpoints into our app.py. So as always, like we need to register the blueprints. So we're going to go into the app.py. We're going to import our controllers here. So from controllers server controller import server controller. Well, that's going to be it. And then, oops, sorry. And then when we go down here, we can register it. So we can copy paste that line and just register server controller. There we go. So now those endpoints should be exposed and we should be able to call them. So before we can test that, we actually need to do like the Unity part. So we're going to go ahead and do right that. All right, so now on Unity side, what we want to do is we want to go into Server Network Manager. And this is mostly where we're going to have a new service here, which is going to be the server, game server or service, something like that. So let's go in here. We're going to make some space and we're going to say game server service. And we're going to say register server. Okay, so this is going to be the first thing. So now we're kind of starting, but by setting up, we're setting up all our Unity config. So you know what? I want to do it first thing. So first thing we're doing is like, hey, by the way, I've been unable, so register me. I need to be registered. So then we're gonna start doing that, start the server, and then we're gonna do the game server service dot set server. Or you know what? No, here we're gonna say ready for players, which internally is gonna do what we want. So it's going to call the set status and it's going to send him our new status, which is we're ready for player to connect. Now let's create the game server service. So let's go in game service, add class interface. This is it. We're not adding this now. So here we are. So now first thing we do our static private string base URL, which is going to be equal to our URL localhost at 500 with a semicolon, and then static private string post register server equal our base URL plus slash server slash register, which is the endpoint we did on our server. And then we're going to do kind of the same, but this is an update server status, and then it's base URL status. There you go. So those are the base URL we need. So now we're going to go and say public public async static task. So this is the register one. It's going to return a bool saying, okay, yeah, we are registered. So register server, which is the one we use. So we're going to need to import this, import the missing reference file. So it's using system threading task. Now what we want to do here is we want to first, we need our IP address. So we're going to do get IP address, which is going to be a function that we're going to do. We're going to declare it. Since it's not that it's not something I've come up with myself. It's something like I found on the internet. So what we're going to do is we're just going to copy it. So here, IP address. Let's go like this. And then so for each, and then it's network interface dot get all network interface. So this is giving you like all your your network interface. So for your network cards, either virtual or not. So it's a network interface that we're gonna have. So let's call it network interface is work fine. Then here we're gonna say if network interface dot network interface type equal network interface dot wireless. So to support like if you are having a wireless somehow server. So if you want to start a server on a laptop or something, that could be something. And then network or if your network type is equal to Ethernet. So this one, Ethernet. So those are mostly like the more plausible ones. So even if it's long, I prefer to keep it on one line. So if it's this, then we're gonna go and say for each here it's network interface that get IP properties dot unicast address. So for all of them, so this is going to be unicast IP address information, so an IP, and we're going to say if IP.address address family equal to system.net socket address family internetwork. So I think that means like an address family that can go out of the network. So so a public address. So return IP.address toString. So I know that this is going to give us like an IP address, but frankly, this is not something like I've done myself. So I trust that this code work. I haven't tested it. I think I haven't tested it, but I'll be able to test it whenever we run this, and I'm gonna see which IP it gives me, and we're gonna be able to see. Okay, so let's go back to our register now. So now that we have our IP address, we're gonna send the data. Oh, dictionary. It's gonna be a string of the data and equal to a new dictionary, like always, and then and like data.add, and then we want to add IP address like the backend service expected. So is it right? IP address, yeah. And then we put in the IP, which is already a string, so that's fine. And then we're gonna send our information, our request. So we're gonna await server request. So this is a post request. We're gonna do post register server, and we're gonna pass in the data. So that's gonna send That's gonna send the request to our server. We're gonna get a response. The response is supposed to be a server object. So what we're gonna do is JSON utility dot from JSON, like here, and then we're gonna say server object that we're gonna create, and we're gonna pass in the response. Okay, and now if we have that server, we're gonna just do some console.log .writeLine, sorry, .writeLine, because this is going to be executed on the server, so I prefer to use this. WriteLine. Let's do $ server registered with backend. No, you know what? We don't need it here, but let's keep it. We might want to add more information. ID. Then we're gonna put here server.id, and then in fact, let's copy this and say the IP. So let's go IP equals server.IP address. Okay, so now that's all good. Now what we're going to need to do is we're going to need to create our model that's going to represent the data that we receive from the server. So server from our backend services. So let's create a class server. There we go. So it's a simple class. So public string ID, public string IP address, and public string status. And you know what? I kind of want to output the status too that we receive. And then status server.status. Okay, so now we're going to import this. So I'm going to do this, but it's going to import a game model. So here it's server JSON utility. There we go. So that we all know that it's a server. So that should be it for the registering part. Now we still would probably like to do the ready for player. So here we just want to return server. Just to be no, return true. Sorry. So if it actually worked. We may want at some point to actually change this, but right now, you know what? I'm actually going to change it right now. So we're going to say it returns a server. So return server. Okay. So that way, we're always going to return this. So that's cool. Now we're going to go on the other side. No, we're going to still go here and create our other methods. So we wanted the public async static again, static task bool and ready for players. So that's going to set the status on the server, on the game server, to okay, I'm ready for a player to come and join this server. I'm actually waiting for connection. So we're going to do the same thing, get IP address. No, you know what? No, not the same thing at all. We don't really need that. In fact, we just need the ID. So actually, we're gonna need the server object. So one important thing would be to store that server. Yeah, that's probably what we're gonna do. We can change that later to be a little bit more easy to work with, because in fact, register server, register ready for players. Yeah, we're gonna store it for now here, but at some point, like maybe we want ready for players to kind of give us a server ID, but for now we're just gonna store it here. Yeah, and we're just gonna return a bool here, return true. Okay, so then here it's gonna do this, and we're gonna do a dictionary of string, which is again the data that we're gonna send. U dictionary. There we go, and then that data dot add here is gonna take two things. Sorry, add. It's going to take one, the ID of the server we want to modify, which is going to be server.id, like this. And then we're going to need data.add the status at which we want to actually set this. So for us, it's going to be this, waiting for players, which should be a value that already exists in the backend. So there it is. So for now, that's it. So string response equals await server request.post, and then we're gonna go with update server status, and we're sending in the data. Okay, so again, server equals JSON utility dot from JSON. It's a server that we receive, so let's pass in that, and there we go. Our server is updated. So return true. We're not doing a lot of error handling. We're not doing a lot of these things because we're going for the golden path right now. We just want things to work and understand how they work. So there we go. We had a game service here, and it can do what we need. So here in our service network manager, let's just import game service using game service. And then ready for players, which is plural. And there we go. Ready for players is going to update our status. And register server is just going to register our server. So in order for our Unity project to kind of be able to read the ID, we're going to need to convert it, because the way MongoDB store ID, you might have seen it in the previous video, is an object. So ID is an object, and inside there's a object ID. It's an object ID. Basically, that's the type of field that it is. And we would like it to be a string, because like we don't need an object ID on the client side, on the game side. We just need a string to reference which ID it is. So what we're going to do is we're going to register something here that's running after the request. It's going to parse the response and just make sure that all ID gets converted to things that the client can actually understand. So let's go. We're going to go in here, right click, new folder. Let's call it middleware. So middleware is that concept of like things that runs during the life cycle of the request. So it can be before the request or after the request. And there's a couple of other hooks that middleware can go and listen to, and then they can run a particular part of the code. So we're going to go in here and init underscore init underscore dot py always, so that this is recognized as a module. And then we're going to do format response dot py. So that's going to be something that's going to format our response whenever we are actually done with the request, and it's going to transfer every ID into a string. So let's go. So we're going to do this, and what we're going to do is format response. There you go. So format response is going to take a response. So this is the object that it's going to receive. So we're going to get the data, response.get get underscore JSON. So this is going to give us the JSON that's actually in the request. And then we're going to format it. Format response ID. In fact, no, you know what? Let's call it here middleware. So that here we're going to have a generic format response. And then we're going to give here the response object so that it can kind of loop on the response. But no, we don't need that. We just need the data here. We're passing it the data, and then it should returns us the data, but that is corrected. And then we're just doing response here dot data equals JSON dot dump with an S, dumps, and then we're gonna pass in data, and then we're just gonna make sure that it's encoded in UTF-8 like this. Okay, so that we preserve some character if there's accent or anything in the name. And then response dot content type is going to be set to application / JSON, which it should already be because we use JSONify, but it's never bad to make it a little bit more explicit. And then we're going to return the response. Okay, so let's go in here and define that format response. That's response that taking the data. Okay, and so for that, what we want to do is we want to actually a new dictionary, which is going to be our new JSON object, and we're gonna say if is instance. So we're gonna want to check if data is a dictionary. That means if it's an object, the JSON objects are going to be a dictionary. So we're going to say for key value in data.items. So for every key in our JSON, we want to check if it's an ID key. So if key equals underscore ID, then we just want to rewrite it. So new dictionary, and we're going to say its name is now ID. And then we're going to say it's the string value of $OED. Oops, sorry, not that. And this is like this. Okay, so that means like now that ID field is going to be renamed to this, the string value right here. And then what we want to do here is if the value that we actually have is a dictionary, because there could be at some point like a composition in our object, which mean like even in our server we have player that where we said we are only going to store string, but we could store a full object in there. So we want to check that. So basically we're going to do the same thing as here, but we're going to check if the value is a dictionary. And if it is, we're just going to call format response again and pass it the value. Good. And else, if it's none of that, then we just set it directly into our new dictionary. So let's put it the same key, and it's going to be equal to the value. Okay, so now that we have that, we can return new dictionary. There we go. So now all that's left to do is we need to actually register that middleware. So let's go into our app.py. In here you can do app.after after request. So for the after request, we want to import our middleware. So from middleware.formatResponse import format response middleware. So this one is going to be passed in here. Okay, so with that, we should be able to have our ID formatted the correct way. So just fixing a typo here. You obviously probably already saw it, but I added P in here, so it's really localhost.5000. There's another typo on our in Visual Studio on our server register endpoint. In here, it's IP address like this for the name of the parameter. All right, one last mistake here on the server side is that I always forget that because whenever you code in Python, my brain switched to Python naming convention, but since we're using the C# convention, our field needs to be named with capital letters in camel cases, so that whenever C# receive it, he's able to kind of return it and parse it. And finally, by changing the convention, we just need to change it here. So IP address equals server IP address, and here we're gonna put status. We can even like make sure I don't do an error here. Yeah, it's it. So okay, so that should work. In order to make like HTTP requests with Unity to non-HTTPS server, you need to change a settings. So we're gonna go in build settings. We're gonna go in player settings, and in players right here, we're gonna scroll down, and in here allow downloads over HTTP. Yours is gonna be a not allowed, and you're gonna put it to allowed in development builds. It might be causing issue. I know it did for me, so I just want to make sure that you guys are okay and are set up. So with this, you can do a build, and then we can test it out. Another fix we need to do here is these methods are async, so we need to make our on enable on server network and async and put the await keyword before the register server and also before the ready for players. Now in Unity, you're going to go in here and do a build. So build setting, make sure you select dedicated server and hit that build button. Already done it on my side. I have it right here. But first we're going to need to start our backend server. So let's go in here. We have our backend services. We're going to go in here, run and debug, and then click that play button. Now we wait for to see this message. That means the service is ready. Now let's go back into Unity. We're going to start this. What we should see is we should see our service registering. And then we're going to go see on the MongoDB side if it registered properly. And it did. So server build, game model server registered with backend and ID started, and server listening for connection. So if we go now in our MongoDB, we can see the server connection. And then if I click it, or let's say refresh the page, I will see right here my server, the IP address and its status. It is now waiting for player. So now we can have in our game functionality where we want to know all the servers that are waiting for players, and we select one randomly and assign it to a player so that he can connect and play with his friends. And there it is for registering backend our dedicated server to our backend, so that later we can do a matchmaking. This was a pretty big video. Also, I hope you managed to get through it. Don't forget that if you need help, we have the Discord server. The link is in the YouTube channel banner. So yeah, so right now we are starting to have a backend that have like a lot of feature. Now in some next video, we're going to be able to query for all the servers that are available for us to join in real life. And I can't stress that enough. You're not necessarily going to want to do this by yourself. So this is really for educational purposes to so that you know how these things work. But if you go with let's say Unity's multiplay, they have a matchmaking service. PlayFab, I do think they have a matchmaking service too. So there are a lot of these game services that you can just use, have those services. But the purpose of this video is just to show you how it works behind, and it might not work exactly like that, but it's going to be something like that in the ballpark of it. And that means it's going to be a little bit easier to use, since you kind of understand a little bit more how it works behind the scene. So yeah, that's it. If you like the video, please like, share, and subscribe. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.